It is early in the morning and it is freezing out here, so I think this video won't be very long. But I haven't been able to sleep for the second half of the night because I had an experience last night that I wanted to share with you all. Last night, it was probably a little after 2 a.m. The vibrational state just kicked in on its own. I was just laying there, just doing some nighttime meditation, and the vibrational state started, and it got to its normal point where I can see through my eyelids, and I'm looking through my sleep mask up at the ceiling above me and kind of glancing around the room. And you know, at that point, it's very easy to just roll out of body or just sit up. And this time it wasn't. This time I felt incredibly heavy, and it was very, very difficult. I tried to sit up and I couldn't. I tried to roll out and I couldn't. So what I ended up doing is I ended up flopping over onto my stomach and doing this army crawl in this 180-degree rotation. So my head is down by my feet and my feet are up by my head. And that seemed to induce the separation process enough to the point where I could actually roll out onto the floor. So I roll out onto the floor, and I start moving away from my body, and just like always, it always becomes easier the further you get from your body. And I still don't know why that is, but by the time I get about to my bedroom door, things have cleared up. It doesn't feel heavy or groggy or anything anymore. And I walk out my bedroom door, and something that I can't see grabs me and just slams me back into my body. And this has happened before. So it was a little easier to maintain control over my emotional state this particular time, not feel too alarmed or scared or excited or anything. So I just lay there, and I immediately took notice of what position I was laying in, made sure not to move, made note of what position my eyes were in. I was looking in sort of a downward direction, made note of how I was breathing, and I just tried to keep all of that exactly the same. Well, luckily enough, the vibrations kicked off again. And so this time it wasn't nearly as hard to get out. I just rolled out of bed. Still felt a little bit of resistance, but it wasn't anything big. And this time I ran for it. I ran out my bedroom door, ran down the hall, and I jumped the flight of stairs. And in the air above the stairs, as I was going down to the main floor, this thing again grabbed me and slammed me back into my body. So I repeated the same process, made note of what position I was laying in, breathing, position of my eyes, kept it all the same, and then I just started focusing on increasing the intensity of this ringing that was in my head. Quite often, along with the vibrations, you end up hearing some noises. In this particular time, it was just this intense ringing sound, and so I focused on this ringing sound, and it built and built and built. It was louder and louder until it turned into the vibrational state once again. So this time I rolled out, and I didn't even bother going for the door. I just dove through the bedroom wall, fell down a story, and landed in the rose garden. And slightly embarrassed to say, this particular time I didn't have a plan of action. I always harp on how important it is to have a plan of action so that you don't waste your experiences. Well, this time, you know, nothing could come to mind. So I just decided I was going to just spend the experience flying. That's never a waste of an experience, in my opinion. So I fly over the roof of my house, and I'm running my hands over the tops of the tree in my front yard, just feeling the branches, trying to decide where to go. And the interview that I had with William Buhlman about a week ago, which I haven't published yet, so sorry about that. I still need to do some editing on that, but I'll hopefully get that up this week. But in that interview, William Buhlman, I mentioned to him that I spend like 99% of my time in this real time zone, in this physical simulation that looks just like the physical world. And you know, all these people talk about these various planes of existence and all this, and I don't experience that most of the time, like almost never. And so he gave me some advice. He said in his workshops, he teaches people to use commands, and you know, manifesting things in these states is much easier, and so these commands tend to be very powerful and seem to work well. One of those that he talks about in his books is clarity now, and he says, you know, put this strong intent behind this demand for clarity, and you just say clarity now, and you'll gain lucidity, and it'll clarify your experience and kind of center you in this non-physical state. And I've used that before, and that works. Now, just note, it has to have intent behind it. It can't just be, you know, clarity now kind of thing. But anyway, so he mentioned a couple of other of these commands that he teaches at his workshops that he's found to be very helpful. He said, you know, one of them is higher self now. And the way that he perceives higher self, or describes this higher self, to me seems like he's talking about like a perfected version of yourself, like the highest possible vibrational state that you potentially could achieve. And so he said, you know, say higher self now with a strong intent, but just know that, you know, a lot of people aren't ready to experience their higher self. I mean, that is a huge jump for most people, to go from this physical vibrational state to this higher perfected vibrational state that you could potentially achieve, I suppose, at some point in time. But so he said, you know, start with that, try it, and if it turns out that that it's not effective, or that it's too intense, then there's other things that we can do. So I started with that, and I screamed higher self now, and I tried to put all this intent into it, not really knowing what to expect, but just wanting to experience something. And it was like this bolt of lightning shot up my spine into my head, and there was just this bang of white light, this to take a phrase from Brian S., this flashbang effect. And I've experienced this before. In fact, I talked about it in one of my videos, where I was hugging that dark entity, and he sent this flashbang into my head to end the experience. So this flashbang effect went off in my head, this burst of white light, but then it faded, and I'm still above the tree and just in my front yard thinking, well, that was interesting, but it really didn't lead me anywhere. It still looks like I'm in this physical world to me. So I did it again, screamed higher self now. Again, this bolt of lightning shot up my spine, this bang in my head. And this time, all of the scenery faded, and I was just in almost like a white void, just this big, empty, spacious nothingness of white. And then I started seeing these like geometric patterns and fractals and things like that, and then I was back in my body, and that was it. So I tried to repeat this process, this laying there, just not moving, and just letting the vibrations happen. And they kicked in one more time, which I have to say is incredibly incredibly fortunate. It's not very often that I can get the vibrational state to kick in so many times in one night. I mean, I would say typically if I can even hit the vibrational state twice in one night, then that's good for me. But this time it just seemed ready to go, and I was keeping my emotions under control, which is also a very difficult thing for me most of the time when I get back. I tend to just be too excited, and my mind just tends to race to the point where I just can't have another experience. But I feel like I did pretty well controlling everything last night. Anyway, so I kick off the vibrational state again. I dive through my bedroom wall down into the rose garden. And so this time I decided I'm going to use his other command. So the other thing that he says, you know, if higher self turns out to be too much, too intense, too big of a leap for you, he says you can say next level now. And the intent of next level now is basically take me to the next level that I am prepared for or can comfortably perceive. So whatever that may be, and that may mean different things to different people. And so I do the same thing. I yell next level now, and as soon as I do that, the vibrations start while I'm in this out-of-body state. And this has happened before. Primarily this happens for me when I meditate in the out-of-body state. I've been experimenting with that for a couple of years now, where I'll meditate while I'm out of body. And it's interesting because the vibrational state kicks in, and it feels just like the vibrations do while I'm prior to the first separation. But when I'm meditating, it just never seems to lead to anything. It's always the vibrations, it's interesting, and then it's over. Well, in this case, the vibrations started, my scenery faded, the surroundings faded, and now I'm standing at the edge of this huge green area. There's these pools of water, there's these giant rocks. It reminds me very much of like Central Park in New York. And what pops into my head is, I bet this is the park, the place that all these people talk about. This, I believe it's Focus 23, I hope I say that right, Focus 23 that Robert Monroe talks about. Basically this meeting area, this place where people can convene after they die, a place where they can rest and recover from any sort of life trauma, where they can meet other loved ones who passed before them. So that's where I think I was last night. There's hundreds of people all over the place, different ages, and there are these people who are dressed up in white from head to toe, like white slacks, white button-up shirt, and they seem to be facilitators. They're guiding people around, and they're helping people find groups that they're comfortable with or that they want to meet. And one of them comes up to me and he says, you know, he doesn't have anybody waiting there for me, but he'll find some place for me to go. And I said, well, you know, I'm just visiting anyway. I'll be gone here in a little bit. I just made it here sort of by accident. Well, one of the other people who's there, this elderly looking gentleman, he heard me say that I won't be here very long and that I plan on going back. And he got visibly upset. he came over and he started calling me a liar and telling me that if he can't go back, nobody can go back, and that you just can't go back. This is it. This is where you are now. And I have to say, this is the first time I ever was actually concerned that maybe I had died, and that maybe he was right, and that maybe that's how I reached this place. Maybe it wasn't through my own doing. Maybe it wasn't through these commands that William Buhlman mentioned. Maybe I had died and this is now my existence. And so I was anxious to end the experience just to prove that I could go back, prove to myself that I could go back. So I started thinking about my body, because that's always a surefire way to end an experience. And it didn't work. And so then I was even more concerned. So yeah, in the end, what I ended up doing is I ended up trying to induce the vibrational state sort of backwards. I mean, it still felt like the vibrations, but I thought, you know, it took the vibrational state to get me here. It was a shift in some sort of frequency, a shift in vibrational level to get me here. So maybe I can do the opposite of that. So I laid down in this park and just focused on inducing the vibrational state, as though I were laying in bed at home trying to induce the vibrational state to create this shift in frequency. So I'm laying there, the vibrations come, and then I'm back in my body. And so it worked. But it was really interesting. That was the very first time I've ever had any sort of level of difficulty coming back. And it's not like I was out for a really long time trying for hours and just couldn't get back, and it was a terrifying thing. It was just more like I got to the point where thinking about my physical body wasn't enough, and I actually had to induce that transition of vibrational, that vibrational transition. I had to induce that in order to make my way back to this physical plane. So that was it. Sorry, this video ended up longer than I thought, and my hands are freezing, so I got to cut this off. But just wanted to share that with you guys. It was an interesting experience. I'm definitely going to be playing with those commands some more and see what else I can discover. So as always, like, comment, subscribe, help me build this community, and I will talk to you guys again soon.